Arsenal went to PSV yesterday and lost the game 2-0. And since then, there's been a lot to talk about in terms of Arsenal season. Is this just a blip, or is this a pattern that we're starting to see with Arsenal where they're just not playing very well? And there's tons of questions around Sambi Lokonga, Eddie Nketiah, and their ability to be reliable backups to really important players like Thomas Partey and Gabriel Jesus. Is the team fatigued? Are they complacent? Is this going to snowball into the Premier League in a it should be a banker um, game against Nottingham Forest, but will this form that we've seen over the last 5 games or so continue on until we get to the World Cup? Those are the questions that are being asked. Those are the conversations that are being had. That's what Arsenal fans want to know, and that's what we're going to talk about. Welcome to She Knows Arsenal. My name is Jessica. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at Justino Tweets and at She Knows Arsenal. This is another match review going through all the nitty gritty of Arsenal's loss against PSV. Make sure you guys like the video and subscribe to the channel. So, yeah, I think that the writing has been on the wall for a little bit in regards to Arsenal's form and the performances and things like that. And early on, those results, performances could really just be shoved to the wayside and say, okay, well, we just didn't play well. We will learn from this, move on, and be better the next game. We've been saying that for 5 games. And I know people don't want to count it, but I count Bodo Glimt away, Leeds away, PSV at home, Southampton away, and now PSV away. That's a lot of away games in a short amount of time. But nevertheless, I do think that Arsenal should be able to perform a lot better away from home than we have seen. There's just a lack of, there's a lot of sloppiness, a lack of intensity, and just a lack of continuity. A lot of those connections that we were seeing early on in the season are broken now, and that might be because some players are missing, but it just doesn't seem like the team is as fresh as it was when the season started. This team has been playing at a very high level and high intensity since the summer. We were one of the only teams that came right out of the gate in preseason playing really, really well. And so when you tack on those games to the beginning of the season and now we're in October, you can see why the team might have ran out of steam. So that's to be expected. But what's not to be expected is players that don't play on a regular basis, not really running and pressing and pushing to get into the starting lineup. And I think that's where the majority of my frustration comes in. I can accept that Gabriel, Saliba, Odegaard, Ben White, Saka, Martinelli, Jesus, Partey, Xhaka, these players don't look fresh every single game because they have been playing at a very high level and a very high intensity since the summer. What I cannot accept is players that are on the fringes, not pushing when they get into these European matches. And when they get these opportunities to come in, we're just not seeing much from them. And I think that's just the reality. And that doesn't mean that they're bad players. It just may mean that they're not good enough for Arsenal. And those are quite things that we can talk about that aren't necessarily like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're saying that. It's just the reality. Because if you think back to Arsenal, of old, the good Arsenal teams of the past, there was always really good players on the bench that just couldn't get into the team because they couldn't get into the team over the likes of Thierry Henry or get into the team over Gilberto Silva. One of those being Edu. When Gilberto came into the side, Edu was relegated to the bench. Thierry Henry comes, Kanu relegated to the bench. At one point, we had Kanu and Wiltord on our bench, but I never once saw them come into a game, whether it was in Europe or the Premier League, and just add absolutely nothing. And you can tell me till you're blue in the face that players need multiple games to get up to standard. But we need players that no matter if they get 8 minutes, 10 minutes here, 45 minutes there, 90 minutes there, regardless of the competition, can get us over the line so we don't have our best players playing every single game. And that is the job of a squad, is to be able to absorb some of that and have players that can come in and do the job. And I'm just not seeing that from some players. And it's really unfortunate because some of the players that are not performing, that have no reason not to be, are also people that are out in the media saying that they deserve more playing time. And so I do sense the frustration. I sense a little bit of a level drop in terms of the fan base. I don't think that when you're losing games and you're not in form, of course the fan base kind of drops a little bit and feels like the bubble is burst. But in as far as the squad is concerned, they need to turn it around because we have three, in my opinion, really important games in the Premier League that we perform in, and then we in Zurich. On paper, we should be able to walk right over them. But seeing how some of these fringe players have performed in Europe over the last couple of games, I'm not sure that I would trust them to get it over the line. Prince Tutu says, "Hi, Jess, you are right. The fringe players are the ones that are playing leggy, which doesn't make any sense at all. They should have energy than the normal starting 11, but that isn't the case." Um, Tope says, Kanu, Bergkamp, Perez, Wiltord, Bergkamp, Ljungberg. Henri was our squad depth in attack in 2000 to 2004. Yeah, no, I understand that, but at the peak of that team, let's not act like, Kanu was the starter and Thierry Henry wasn't. Once that team got to its height, it switched. So, and regardless, did you ever see Thierry walk around because Kanu was starting? I think my point still stands, regardless to if you want to say it was to 2004 or beyond that. So I don't know why it never works when I try to do anything with you guys. It just, the internet is horrendous here and it's driving me up the wall. Sanjeev says, Arsenal urgently need a striker, Jesus, and a better attacking option. Mark says, apparently Arteta's fixed the defense and has cleared and cut the wage bill by keeping Nketiah, Lokonga, and Holding. Well, our defense is one of the best in the league. So, whether or not with our more current, still only given up in the one PS1 in the Europa. I get that. Let's stay there and not bring our past agendas in to try to make our points. Our defense is quite, especially our starting defense, clearing ones. And what we're learning is that players like Nketiah and Lokonga and Holding are probably not good enough, but we have cleared a lot of dead wood. So just because we still have dead wood here doesn't mean that there hasn't been a massive um, so sorry. Like, I can't see anything on my screen. My internet's not working, and I feel like I'm about to cry. I don't know why. It's not working. Give me a second, guys. Um, why is this not working? Why is the internet I don't know. Can you guys see me or hear me? Please let me know. I actually pressed end the broadcast and the internet was still so bad that it didn't even end it. I don't know if you guys are still here, let me know. So frustrated. Okay. Let's see. Looks a little bit better now. So we'll continue to go. I'm so sorry, you guys. But okay. So, you just get so frustrated, like you just feel like you're gonna cry. Like that's how it felt right now. Um, I saw that somebody said we haven't been good since Liverpool. It's true. Like our performances have really dipped since that game. And, you know, I think, playing two really difficult games in a row, highly emotional games, Spurs and then Liverpool back to back, and then turning around and having so many away games in a row does put a strain on the squad. But I just feel like this team needs more depth that are willing to push these starters. And this is not like to kill Nketiah, Sambi, Vieira, any of these players. It's just, you know, we're learning that we need so much more. And at the beginning of the season, I thought that, these players might be able to come in and do a job. In Europa League, it's going to be easier competition. We could rotate five or so players and it will probably be okay. But as the games go on, it's like after the Zurich game, which was like our first Europa League game, I thought we were so poor, like in terms of finishing chances and just being professional. And we've gotten to the point where we're bringing in the starters to save us in those games, and I don't think that that was the plan. And yesterday, you know, I personally did not have a good feeling about the game because I haven't seen Arsenal's form turn around yet. I haven't seen our form turn around, so I just kind of felt like, okay, we'll probably play poor again, especially away from home, looking leggy. And so, I looked at the lineup and I didn't love it just because the right-hand side had Odegaard and Vieira in it, and we know that both of them kind of lack dynamism. We know what Saka brings to the table. He's quick and he's direct, and um, he's unpredictable. And I think Vieira not being like a natural winger makes him more predictable on that side, that he's going to try to play make instead of try to get into the box and take shots and things like that. And him and Odegaard tend to want to do similar things. Um, and then you had Tomiyasu on that side, which was okay, but you knew you weren't going to have an overlap. So I didn't know what that was going to look like. I didn't know what that was going to look like. Um, Saliba and Holding on paper was fine, but I think when you look at it, you can understand why we play Gabriel in most games. It's him and Holding are so much better than Saliba and Holding, for some reason. I'm not sure if you guys saw it, but it just didn't feel like they had much continuity, or neither of them wanted to take the reins. And, once Gabrielle came in, we felt a lot more secure. But yeah, something about that partnership didn't work. I thought Tierney had a really difficult day playing up against that Javi Simons. He had him on toast. Like 1v1, Tierney just wasn't getting near him. And on the day, he didn't do much to make us feel comfortable that he should be the left back starting. Against Nottingham Forest, I still would start him if Zinchenko was not there, but that was not a good display from Tierney, like in any way. He looked scared to make a tackle. He looked scared to defend. He just kind of got in the same area as him, but he was so afraid, I think, to get toasted or to give up a foul that, he just didn't do any defending. And that was really disappointing. Then in the midfield, I thought Xhaka looked tired. And he has every right to look tired because he plays every game for Arsenal, and so I look at Xhaka and it's just like, what can he do? And when he's playing with Sambi, he has to drop a lot deeper, so you lose some of that because we don't have fullbacks that overlap. They None of them overlap. Even when Tierney does it, he doesn't do it that much anymore. He plays inverted like everybody else. So if you don't have fullbacks that overlap and you don't have another attacker, they're pretty isolated up there. And that's how I just kind of felt about the attack, is that it was just isolated. There wasn't that additional threat. Xhaka couldn't get up as much because he had to be right next to Sambi at all times. Odegaard, poor performance, I have to say. He just looked lost out there. And I never really worry about him, but he just didn't look like himself. And I'm just like, is he carrying an injury or what? But he got hooked. Um, and then you come to the attack, and Martinelli is another one that I feel like he has every right to be tired and maybe feel like he shouldn't be coming into these games. He tried his best, but there wasn't much that he could do because it just isn't the same. Like, you don't have the same flow and the same continuity on that side. He has Tierney that wasn't really doing much, it's especially like once PSV kind of came more into the game. You know what I mean? Um, and so I thought Martinelli looked off, and then Vieira was okay. Like, when I watch Vieira, I thought that he did good things, but it's just not the things that we needed in that position, you know? The things that, like, in that position, we really need somebody that's gonna take their man one-on-one, is gonna really, like, make the defenders have to think. And I think Vieira was doing a lot of the things that he does well in the middle of the park, but in a position where that's not really what we needed. And so Vieira's performance was more just a symptom of playing out of position. But I think we've also learned that he's probably not somebody that we want to play right wing, you know, at least not in the short term. And then you come to Eddie Nketiah. And for me, 100 bags a week, always talking about how he needs playing time. He just has been poor in the Europa League. I just don't feel like he's giving as much as he can. And if you guys remember, like, back when he first came into the team, when Lacazette wasn't playing well, he first came into the team and he played against like Southampton, and we lost, and he was poor and really couldn't get into the game. It felt a lot like that, and how I've always felt about Eddie Nketiah when he's not on it is, why isn't he pressing? Why isn't he running? Why is he jogging? And it wasn't until he did get that run of games against Chelsea and against Man United, et cetera, against Leeds, where he started to look like a player that everybody's been talking about or waiting on, to show up. And I'm starting to get shades of Nketiah pre-Chelsea again, where if you need 3 or 4 games to play or to give us anything, then you're not the right player to back up Gabriel Jesus because he's the starter. And so if you're unwilling to try to push him for that position, and to add something with the team because you're not going to play the next game, then you're not the right backup striker for Arsenal. We need players that, regardless if they get 2 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 45 minutes, 90 minutes, they fucking run. They press, they push, they shove, they make themselves a nuisance. That's one of the things that Eddie's the best at. Not only has his technical quality dropped um off a cliff, he can't hold on to the ball. I think early on in that match he gave up the ball maybe 4 times early on in that match, but he doesn't have the same spark where he's running down defenders and running down goalkeepers, and I'm just not understanding why. Maybe it's enforced by the manager, but I can't I don't believe that, because why does Eddie need to conserve his energy? He's not going to play the next game. He's not going to play against Nottingham Forest. So why does he need to conserve his energy? And so I thought he's been pretty poor in the Europa League. And it's unfortunate for him because once we get beyond the Zurich game, they're not playing. Sambi, Eddie, Vieira, maybe even, they're not playing these games. There's not gonna be any games for them to play. We're gonna have to play our starting 11 every single game until, we're no longer in the Europa League or whatever. And so they didn't do much to really make people second guess whether or not they should be playing games or not. It just reinforced the idea that we need more squad depth, and our starting 11 is our starting 11, and it's locked in. You even saw the gap in quality between White and Tomiyasu. There's a reason why White plays almost every single game. It's because he's way better than Tomiyasu in turn. Not way better, but he's better. There's definitely a drop off there, and there definitely is. It's there. So the starting 11 is what it is, and so we have to hope that we can get to January or the World Cup and the the club reinforces the squad, because I don't think we're gonna make it with what we have. We saw last season we couldn't make it, and if we have to rely upon Eddie and Sambi for a significant amount of time, I think we can see a real drop off in our results because they're just not good enough. They don't add enough. They're not doing anything, and that may sound harsh, but they're not doing anything. There's not anything that I can really think of that, besides losing the ball, that I can see, and that's unfortunate because I really started to change my mind on Eddie, and I do think that there's a player there, but that player will only show up if he knows that he's gonna get 3 or 4 games on the bounce, and you're not gonna ever be guaranteed that at Arsenal Football Club. You're not gonna be guaranteed that, so if you need that guarantee, this might not be the right place for you. Lod Lugan says, "Odegaard is capable of more than he's doing now. The captaincy must go back to Xhaka." At this point, I do think that the Odegaard captain thing is something that doesn't need to be focused on that much, because we all know that Xhaka's the captain and Gabriel Jesus and Odegaard are kind of have a role in that, but it's granite, so I don't really focus on it that much, because he's basically an honorary captain, because I don't even know why Arteta doesn't just give it to Granite, because none of us care anymore. He's turned the corner enough where I think people wouldn't mind him getting it back. Odegaard may be the captain on the field or on the pitch, but he just doesn't have that personality really about him. And so I don't know why Arteta didn't just give it to Granite. I kind of understand why. Maybe it's because of all the drama and all that kind of stuff after the Crystal Palace game. But Odegaard's not really the captain. I don't see him that way. Cafunso says Eddie hasn't enough presence. He doesn't have enough presence, and you don't have to be big to have presence. We've seen that with Gabriel Jesus. He can be the thorn in your side. He really, really can be. So it's not even about height or anything like that. It's about intent, and his intention. I don't know what his intention was yesterday, because from minute one, I knew Eddie was going to have a bad game because he lost the ball 3 times, like, in a short amount of time. There was even a time where they had an attack, and, he won the ball kind of like in that in between space between the box and the middle circle, and it was a simple pass that he needed to pass to Tierney. Simple pass, very simple, and he overhit it and it went out. And Tierney turned and looked at him and was like, "What the hell?" And we got lucky because they called it offsides. But I knew, I was like, "You're just not in it." They're getting in their head. I don't know. It feels like they're getting in their head that they need to impress because these are the only minutes that they're going to get. And because they're in their head, they don't perform. And it's just backwards. You just need to run and play your game, regardless because if you, again, if they need to know that they're going to get 3 or 4 or 5 games on the bounce, then they need to be somewhere else because they're not going to get that. Jacobson says, "Why do people say Lokonga is an 8 and not a 6? Odegaard, Vieira, Xhaka all offer different kinds of valuable threats higher up the pitch. What would Sambi offer if playing 8?" Well, I've asked this question several times, and I don't really believe that he's an 8 either. I don't know what he is. He might be like a pivot player, but I think Sambi's main issue is not that he can't play the 6 is that he cannot play the 6 at the level that we require. And that if he were to go to Serie a slower league, a less physical league, he probably could sit at the base of a midfield and dictate play for that in like a regista type role, or kind of like Jorginho, something like that. Um, but because the Premier League is so physical, and teams don't allow you to have um, unpressured possession, he's just not that guy, and he's not good on transition, and he has no intensity in his body. So I do think that we bought a player that's supposed to play number 6. I don't think we've misprofiled him or anything like that. The videos or the film that I saw of him was him playing deep in midfield. So I think he's a base midfield player. He just can't play it at our level because he doesn't have the awareness, the physicality, or the intensity to play it at our level. As an 8, he offers nothing from a box to box perspective because he's a nice passer in the 8 position, but the way that we play it now, you have to be able to play make, you have to be able to add something in terms of maybe goals and assists, and Sambi doesn't really come off like somebody that's gonna give you any goals or assists in that position, not at a high level, not at the Premier League level. And so I think he's just somebody that is not as good as maybe we thought he would become, maybe needs a loan, maybe needs to be in a different league, but I don't think we've misprofiled him. If he were to play number 8, if we were to take him out of that position and he were to play number 8, he would not be getting in the team over anybody that plays there now, so I'm not quite sure about the 8 thing either. I just think he hasn't been as good as maybe we expected him to be, and maybe he does need playing time in order to get that level, but I don't think he's gonna learn situational awareness, defensive positioning, intensity. I don't think, because I've seen no change in that since he's been here. And so if you don't, you can change quickly if you want to. And so I just feel like this is just who he is. Saida says, I always felt like it was a mistake to re-sign Eddie as a backup striker. I remember you saying that, Saida. You were very like, very straightforward on that you didn't think it was a good idea. I think the club made a business decision instead of a footballing one. At some point, they have to stop being cheap. Yeah, I hear you. I mean, there's just players that we're learning about. I feel like we're learning things about players and we're learning what their level is. And we knew that, like, the likes of Kolasinac and um who else did we get rid of? Bellerin and like these guys, like we knew that they weren't at the level. Mustafi, like these guys, we knew that they weren't of the level. And now we have some younger players that we may need to make decisions on. I think that's a little bit more difficult than like older players that we kind of know who they are. With Eddie and Sambi, they're both at the doorstep of their prime. Sambi just turned 23 and Eddie in May will be 24. And so we will know whether or not they're good enough, and I think the writing is kind of on the wall because we looked for a number 6 in the summer. So we brought Sambi in to be a number 6 and we looked for somebody else. Um, so they did not feel comfortable with him just by himself. El Neni plays above him. So what does that say, about Lokonga? I'm not saying that his career at Arsenal is indefinitely over. I just have huge questions around whether or not he'll ever be at the level in which we require. Jim Wiley says Lokonga is all right, but need even as good as Francis Coquelin. Let's see. Michael says in preseason, Sambi showed great passing range and runs into the box. I think the club see him as an 8, even if he doesn't. Yeah, I did see some of that in preseason. The only thing I would say, Michael, is that those were very low quality matches that he was doing that in. So, do I see him in a Premier League game getting on the end of moves? Do I see that for him? Not really. I think that the future of that role probably is more of a Emil Smith Rowe situation than a Sambi one. But they know more about it than I do because I'm not in training. I don't know. I don't see. But just from what I can see, the way that the 8s play now, that's not Sambi. Olivier says Sambi can play and facilitate, but cannot create yet from that sixth position. Um, Saida says, even as an eight, Lokonga isn't anything special. I'm over the whole he needs a loan. I'd say just sell him and get a player that can actually contribute to the team. Well, I'm not quite at the sell him stage. I'm more at the let's maybe give him a loan and see what happens. But he's I would say like I'm firmly in the place where he cannot help us now. You know, Sambi is not going to help us now. He's not going to help us in this campaign. This was the time in the group stages of the Europa League. This is when the likes of Nelson and Nketiah and Lokonga and Vieira, ESR, but he's injured, were supposed to help us get over the line and not get as many minutes in the legs of some of our most important players. And I would say that they haven't done a good job doing that. And so, you know, we'll go into the second half of the season and we'll see what happens and where the chips fall. But the fact that there's rumors, strong rumors out there that Arsenal will look at, you know, a midfielder and a winger or an attacker, I think spells just how Arsenal feel about those two players is that they're not good enough to get us over the line. And I think that that's clear. They're not going to get much playing time beyond this. Um, let's see. Aha says even against Bodo at home, you could see Lakonga's lack of defensive awareness. He just doesn't have any, and he doesn't seem like somebody that like is desperate to figure it out or you know is if you want to change, you can, you know, and every game that goes by, I see the same things. Like yesterday for PSV's first goal, you know, the ball went over Lakonga's head. He was still jogging. And then they passed it out to the player out there on the left. Tomiyasu didn't do very well for it, but Sambi was still jogging over towards him and just never really seemed desperate to keep that goal from going in. And that's why he was yanked immediately after that. Thomas Partey, before their first goal, was being stripped. Before that. So Arteta already knew, okay, this guy, he's not getting it. We're going to lose. We're going to give up a goal. And it's unfortunate that we couldn't get Thomas Partey on before the first goal went in. But I watched Sambi watch the ball go over his head, not do anything about it. And you see when Thomas Partey is out there, he gets his legs involved. Like he tries to intercept the ball. He tries to make a tackle. He tries to intervene defensively. And I don't even consider Thomas Partey a real defensive, central defensive midfielder, but he has the awareness to like know where he wants to be. Even when Thomas Partey came in, there was a break for PSV and it was like 3v3. Saliba was in no freaking man's land. Like he didn't know where he was supposed to be. He went out wide and Thomas Partey came in and intercepted the ball and it went out for a corner. And those are just things that Sambi's never going to be able to do. Like I just don't think at 23 years old that's something that he's going to be able to develop because I don't see a desire to fix it. You know, these have been some easy games that he has played that he has not shown any emphasis on it. Like, you know what I mean? So, um yeah, it's just unfortunate for him. I do feel for him a little bit because he knows that he's playing a position that the club didn't never really felt like he was comfortable to play. Because obviously El Neni took his position last season. And then we started off the season with him playing as an eight. And then at the transfer window, we brought in another, we were trying to bring in another number six. So I think he knows that this is not a position that the club feel comfortable with him playing or want him to be playing at this moment. But at the same time, you got to suck it up. You have to suck it up and still perform. I think the Arsenal fan base would be a lot more lenient or less harsh if we just saw him bust a gut. You know, if we just saw him run fast, if we just saw him try to make a slide tackle or something, if we just saw something, you know, I think we'd be less because we know that that's not his natural position, or it's not a position that he's playing well in. Jim White says Partey is immense, does so much with his touch, testing out the markers, playing risky-ish games, bombing the ball forward with little dink chips. I feel like he deserved a better midfield partner, though. I'm okay with the Thomas Partey Xhaka combination, especially now that Jack is playing in a position that suits him a lot better. In the beginning, it was kind of opposite. It was, you know, Xhaka doing a lot of the stuff at the base and Partey trying to do more of a shuttling role. It was strange, it didn't feel right. Now we've gotten to a nice little equilibrium where both of them are playing in the positions that suit them best. So I'm okay with this partnership. It's just if you don't have one or the other, it's really difficult to see how you're gonna keep us playing in this way. And that's really the issue is that there's nobody in the squad yet that can do either of those jobs. There's nobody in the squad that could do Xhaka's role, that could do Partey's role, that could do Jesus' role, and can do Saka's role. And those are 4 players that we can't afford to get injured. We cannot afford those players to get injured. Saida says, "Wasn't Lakanga recommended by Company and Thierry? Maybe a loan at Burnley would help." We were talking about this in a group chat earlier where I was like, somebody needs to call Vincent Company and say, why did he think that this boy was going to be the next Yaya Toure? Because I'm not seeing it. Um, but yeah, I just think alone would suit Lakanga because he's constantly talking about how he needs playing time and how he needs playing time. He's not going to get it at Arsenal, especially if we go into the January transfer window and bring in a midfielder. He's going to go more and more down that list. So yeah. Um, let's see. Aha says, Jess, who in the Arsenal squad do you consider as world class? For me, only Partey is borderline world class. We don't have any world class players in our team. We don't. For me, world class is just something that is very specific and can't just be thrown around. I see people saying players are world class after a couple of games, one season. You can have world class games or be in world class form, but not be a world class player. And I think we have some players in our team right now that are entering into that room where at points in the season they have world class form or they have world class games, but it's nowhere near consistent enough for us to really be saying that they're world class. And that's really the only thing that's keeping Partey from being world class, in my opinion, is the fact that he's injured too much. So he doesn't have the consistency to be considered that, but he's probably the closest in our team. I think he's one of the only players that could probably play for Liverpool and City and it not look like it was above him. I think he is I mean, Casemiro has entered, the chat, so it's a different game now because he is, without a shadow of a doubt, world class. But I think before Casemiro came in, I thought Thomas Partey was right up there with Rodri and Fabinho, and he's very underappreciated and disrespected because of his lack of availability, but those are the things that keep you from being in those conversations. So yeah, we don't have any world class players in our squad, and that's also an issue. Everybody around us that we're fighting against has world class players in their team, and so as Arsenal, they could wait for Saka and Martinelli to become world class, but it'd be nice for them to bring in a world class midfielder and maybe a really really good attacker. Jesus, he's another borderline one, but he's another borderline one, but he goes through too many patches of, not scoring goals and stuff like that. It's just hard. It's difficult. Um, and I consider world class to be something, um a very small group of players really can be considered that. Jesus, again, is borderline with Thomas Partey, but that consistency needs to be there. Jesus can become world class at Arsenal, but he spent too much time on the bench at Manchester City for us to really be, calling him world class. He didn't play enough. He didn't play enough consistently. He wasn't relied upon by Pep. Those things come in. I think those things do come into the conversation. Um, but it's not that I don't think that they can get there. Um, so we'll see. Aha says if Jesus was a better finisher, then maybe. That's a good point. O'Malley says Jesus doesn't score enough goals yet to be called world class. I mean, you think about like somebody like Firmino, who I think is kind of like the perfect comp for Jesus, quite similar in the way that they're being used at their team at their clubs. And what we're really asking is for Martinelli and Saka to be, you know, scoring the majority of our goals. And Jesus does a lot of the facilitating and also chips in for goals. But The reason why people considered Firmino to be such a good player is because of his consistency, but he would never really be considered world class in that position because we know that the center forward position is really nailed down for players that score tons of goals. So it's tough, but I don't even think that that's I think the better players that we bring in, the better players like Partey and Jesus will perform. And that's what we really need to focus on. Neil says the clubs that have world class players because they have an owner who won't hesitate to buy them rather than relying on a process that has taken years to work, which has no guarantee it will work. So I kind of hear that, but at the same time, you can't build what we're trying to build by bringing in 3 or 4 world-class players because you can't have world-class players playing with Mustafi. Like, it's just not how it is, and I get why they built from the bottom and built the foundation so that these players could grow together. Um, I think at this point, we're looking at the club and saying, "What are you gonna do now? How are you gonna get us over the line?" I think we need world-class players in order to win the league. I don't think we need world-class players to make top 4. I think we can make top 4 with relatively what we have. What we have now is good enough to get us into the top 4 if we reinforce it with some players, but in order to win the league, we do need to bring in those world-class players, and that's where I'm really looking at it from. I think this process was needed, some version of a process where we strip it down and start anew. I don't think we could have done much with what we had, and we tried to do something with what we had, and we finished 8th. So I think I kind of hear what you're saying, but we know the process is working. We can see it with our own eyes. So let's not pretend like because we lost a game that everything that we've done up to this point is moot. But it's a matter of what do they do from here? Because in order to get us to win titles, we will need world class players. And so that's where the Cronkies, we need to keep pressure on the Cronkies from there. Osonuga says Arsenal not going for Guimaraes for 38 million to sign Fabio Vieira 6 months later for 35 is a head scratcher. Um, kind of. You guys know I'm a huge fan of Bruno Guimaraes. I knew he was going to be this. I knew he was going to be this. And anybody with eyes knew he was going to be this. It's not like I was like the only person who thought this. I just knew. I was like, this guy is going to be it. There were actually people who did think that he wasn't going to do well in the Premier League. It's a joke. But the thing about Bruno is that he is in a different place in his career than Fabio Vieira. Fabio Vieira is younger, like he doesn't even play for his senior national team yet. And Bruno Guimaraes is a starter. Like he is a starter. He's going to come in and expect to start. And I think because Arteta and the club had a plan for Granit Xhaka, it was going to be hard to convince Bruno to come in, for that. Um, Not knowing that maybe he wasn't going to start or whatever. And so I kind of understand why the club may have not went after him at that moment, especially because we weren't like it's a difficult one because had we had gotten him, we could have maybe potentially gotten Champions League. So it's a tough one. I think I can understand why the club didn't go for him, but at the same time, I don't think for me, I view Bruno Guimaraes and Fabio Vieira as two different things. I don't think I view the Fabio Vieira money as Bruno Guimaraes money. That's not how I really think about it. I think Fabio Vieira has shown me enough so far that I think he's going to be really good for us. I know people are down on him at the moment, especially because it feels like everything is falling down. But we forget how well he played against Brentford. He played really well in several of the Europa League matches. I think between him and Eddie and Sambi, he's been the only one that has looked decent. And he just got here, remember? Like he's still trying to adapt to the league and stuff like that. So I kind of understand where you're coming from. It's like if we were going to spend that money, we should have just spent it on Bruno Guimaraes then. But we don't really know what Bruno was thinking in terms of his career. Like, does he want to be in a situation where he potentially is fighting for playing time, or does he want to go straight into a project where he's going to be guaranteed those minutes? It's a weird one, but there's something there where we were interested in him and we instantly became uninterested in him. So I don't know if he maybe wasn't as interested in our project as maybe we had wanted for a player to come in to be interested. You know what I mean? Like he didn't like us as much as we liked him. Maybe it was the wages that he was asking for. I'm not sure, but I don't really view it that way. But I understand like that's a player that would fit in a lot with us. I think that type of player needs to come in this summer. Somebody that could definitely take over for Xhaka next season. But it's hard. Like it's hard. I understand, but I don't know. I don't know. I really want to give Vieira a chance because I think I've seen enough from him so far to feel like he has some talent, and it's difficult, for him to come in from a completely different league and be playing little spotty minutes here and there. And I think we just need to give him time. Saida says, does Danilo play similarly to Bruno G? Um, No, I think Danilo plays more similarly to Thomas Partey. I think he's not necessarily the most offensive, but he's can definitely play make from that deep position. He has a really good passing range, and he can dribble away from the opposition like Thomas Partey does when he's under pressure. Um, so I think he plays more similarly to Thomas Partey than Bruno G does. But Bruno would have been, if we stayed in a 4-2-3-1, he would have been perfect as a partner for Partey, right next to him in that pivot. Um, but Bruno also can get into the box and score goals. Like he's an all-around midfielder, and I think we lack that in our team sometimes. Like we have a lot of specialists, but not a lot of good, well-rounded players. Mark Bevan says Kane isn't a world-class footballer, but he's a world-class finisher. Jesus is nowhere near either. Well, see, here's the thing. It's like you can say that Jesus is not world class, but you can't say that he's nowhere near it because he has over 100 goals in English football right now. So a lot of players like Son, um, like Son, um, Mane, like these types of players, a lot of those, they are older than Jesus, but they had like 100 plus goals in the Premier League. Jesus has 100 goals in English football, period. So I get that we want to make it seem like he's nowhere near it, but because he has played at a high level, he has been here for 4 seasons. He did play for the best team in the country, and he has the talent. We can't just say because he's not like Kane, he's nowhere near it. He can get to it, and it's not just as and here's the thing that you said, he's Kane isn't a world-class footballer, but he's a world-class finisher. Jesus is a better footballer than Harry Kane. So, I think Jesus is closer to being a world-class footballer than he is to a finisher. So, I feel like he can get there if you were to add the finishing to it, and he were to do it consistently over a certain amount of time, and to be really instrumental in us winning trophies and things like that, because that's actually what gets you to being world class. But to say he's nowhere near either when we know that Jesus is a very, very good footballer, I think is wrong. And Kane is world class. He is, like, how do we just describe Kane? I think if Kane won one major trophy, I'd consider him world class. He does have to get that trophy, but yeah, Kane is right on the line of that. Why do we do this though? Why do we do this when we're not happy with the way that we're playing? We decide every single thing is shit. Why do we do that? I don't understand. I get that we're upset, but like our players are not crap. We're not falling apart. We're just having a difficult time. We don't have the depth. We know we need the reinforcements. We know we need the performances need to go up. But I just kind of get tired of some of this stuff. Like to say Jesus is nowhere near it is silly. Like because he is a very, very, very good footballer. Like he really is. He doesn't have the finishing, but he could become world class and he's only 26. So I don't get it. Um, I don't know. Mackie says Jesus isn't a better footballer than Kane. Jesus is a quality player, but Kane is probably one of the best strikers in Premier League history. I disagree. I think that Kane is a better striker than Jesus, but I think in terms of what they can do on the ball, in terms of dribbling, the skills, all that kind of stuff, I still think that Jesus if I had to choose somebody that I wanted on the ball, I'd probably still choose Jesus. But again, like there's not much in it. I don't think that Jesus is like so clear of Kane, but for me, you can't see what you saw from Jesus in, August and September for Arsenal and say he's not a top footballer. I think recency bias kills it. Um, Butterpants says Jesus is very close to a world-class bracket in my opinion. I think he can get there at Arsenal, but there's some things that he needs to work on for sure. Let's see. Laud Lugan says a sharp Odegaard, a dangerous Jesus. That's not the case right now. Odegaard isn't sharp enough right now, and it's affected Jesus and Martinelli. I disagree because Odegaard put 2 chances on a plate, at Southampton for Jesus. Odegaard was really good against Southampton in the first half, so Odegaard is not stopping Jesus from putting these chances away. This is on Jesus, and Martinelli is not suffering because of Odegaard. I think Martinelli suffers from not knowing who's gonna be playing behind him on a weekly basis. I think Martinelli needs consistency. When it was Zinchenko, Xhaka, and Martinelli, I thought we got a better Martinelli because that worked, the balance was there, and you had enough technical quality on that side to help him because he's not the most technical player. Now you have either Tierney or Tommy, neither one of them are overlapping enough. Neither one of them are doing much in possession on that side. And so Martinelli is actually more suffering from the left back, not Odegaard. And again, Odegaard, he had that scoop pass against Southampton that really Jesus should have put away, and then he also put Jesus in for a one-on-one. His form is not good because Jesus is out of form. Um, I just I don't agree. Um, I don't agree with that. Let's see. Millen says he lost possession against United, which resulted in their second goal. Um, who was that? I don't even remember that game. It was so long ago. Um, Cliff says, great show, Jess. Love how you don't convince fans that we're not seeing what we're seeing with pathetic excuses. F the haters. I mean, I just try to say what's really happening. It's not that, because when I'm saying that, I'm not saying that the world is falling down. I'm just saying that things aren't perfect right now, and they're not. So um I remember when we played against Fulham and Aston Villa one after another at home, and we beat them both 2-1, but I felt that we weren't clinical in those games, and we really should have been it should have been like 4-1, or 4-0 or something like that, and people got upset by me saying that, and I'm like, that can creep into games where you're not playing necessarily well, where you're not clinical. It needs to be clinical no matter what, and even though we're riding the high, we should still look at some of these things and say, why are they happening? Now our lack of clinical finishing, it's fucking killing us. And people are acting like it came out of nowhere. The lack of clinical finishing actually started against Aston Villa and Fulham, where we had these chances that we should have just put away. And we keep teams in the game too long. Had we had finished any of those chances that we had against Southampton in the first half, we wouldn't have even had to think about anything in the second. And so it's okay to speak about those things. Let's see. Um, Ify says Jesus plays in defense, attack, and midfield. I think he needs to be in the central role, but that's just the way he plays. Yeah, I do think that there's a little bit of that desperation to be involved in everything that keeps him from being where we need him to be on the end of moves. And so you see a little bit of that, like what we had last season with Lacazette, where we just have nobody in the box. And I think some of that comes from like just being like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. We don't need Jesus to come back and take the ball off of Thomas Partey's toe. We don't need that. We need him to stay in his position. And I just think he gets frustrated and starts trying to do too much. And those are things that he just has to learn, but he's playing in a new team with a new responsibility. And I know he's taking it seriously, but sometimes it's to the detriment of what we're trying to do. Frey, the Viking, says, do you think we need another striker then? I do feel like we need more of a killer to pose a different problem and to offer something different than Gabriel Jesus and Eddie. I think a lot of times when we go through these like goal droughts, people automatically say, okay, we need a big, strong striker. We need a big, strong striker. We need a big, strong striker. I just think we need somebody that's in form that can score goals and play the way that we play. I think our attackers tend to go through goal droughts at the same time. And if we had somebody that just could score goals, we'd be fine. So I'm not really that fussed about because we're never going to be like lumping crosses into the box. The thing is you guys, is we've only lost 1 game. We've lost 2 games and we've drawn 1, and we've been really good this season. In October, we've won 6 and lost 1 and drawn 1. So the way that we play works. It does. I just think that, you know, the idea of having somebody there, I think my fear would be is bringing somebody in that's a tall physical striker, is if they can't do any of the other stuff, we will only need them in like a 2%, you know, game, like 2% of the time, 3% of the time, and there won't be enough need for them to be there. Whereas if we just had like like I would prefer to have had like Rafinha. That would have been my preference, is not necessarily another striker, but just another attacker that can kinda do what Gabriel Jesus, can kinda do what Martinelli does, can kinda do what Saka does, but also can score goals. And so when our team, our players go through these goal droughts, or they start to, you know, they come out of form, you have somebody else that can do the same thing, so we don't have to change the way that we play, but they also have goals in them. That would be my what I would prefer. But, I can understand why people want, like, a different type of striker. They want, like, an Ivan Toney, or, somebody that's, taller, stronger, and all that kinda stuff. I just fear we're not gonna need that player as much as we think we're gonna need them, because that's just not the way that we play. And the way that we play, we beat 95% of teams the way that we play. It's just that 5%. If we just had somebody else, you know, um I think we'd be okay. The club knew. They knew over the summer that we needed another attacker, another, winger, that could do what Martinelli and Saka does, and they also knew that we needed a midfielder. We just didn't get it done for some reason. Um, so for me, it's not really about a striker. It's about just another attacker that can play the way that we play, but is on the same level of the players that we already have. So not a Marquinhos, you know what I mean? We really miss Emil Smith Rowe. I'll tell you that. Like, because he used to be able to come in and change these games, where we were kind of stale, because he has the ability to break lines, by carrying the ball. And we don't have any ball carriers in our team, really. Xhaka is not a ball carrier. Odegaard's not a ball carrier. Vieira is not a ball carrier. And so, you really don't want Martinelli and Saka coming deep and trying to break lines in that way. It would be nice if you had somebody in midfield that can do it. And the best example of that was, unfortunately, we lost, but first game of the season last season against Brentford, you saw what ESR could do in the 10/8 role. He just has a different skill set that we don't have in the team at all right now. If we can't pass it, we can't do shit. And so sometimes you just need a player that can get us from point A to point B as quickly as possible. And ESR is like perfect for that. So we definitely miss him. And we 100%, as Sai Deep says, we really miss Zinchenko. Having a press resistant player like him would help us control the games more from midfield. I thought the best thing about having Zinchenko was we didn't have to rely upon Thomas Partey as much. Um, I thought Partey's role was so much more muted in those first couple of games when Zinchenko was there, because he could actually play that inverted role, and Partey was not like the only person. Against Leeds and against Southampton, when they decided that they wanted points in those games, they really put a lot of players around our center backs and Thomas Partey. They had 3 or 4 players just sitting in those channels, making it really difficult for us to build through those pods that we usually build from. And so we don't really have like another outlet. And because Tomiyasu is not great on the left, it's just we're missing something on that side. So yeah, I think we miss Zinchenko, and I would just like to see us, when we're under pressure and teams are not allowing us to do our little triangles, hoof it long and run after the defenders and make them make a mistake. It's simple route one football, but we just don't do enough of it, and I'm not quite sure why. The further the opposition is to you and your goal, the better off you are. And I think sometimes we take risks kind of right in front of our box and start trying to pass the ball around when we should just probably, instead of making Gabriel Jesus come short and adding more traffic into those areas, make him go long. We rarely play it in behind the fullbacks and make them face their goal. I don't know why we don't do it more. We're doing it at the beginning of the season. We don't do it anymore, not as much. Um, let's see. Blaze says, Jess, we miss right now ESR, Zinchenko, and El Neni. I don't know about El Neni. I get what you're saying because we don't have another option to Partey that we feel comfortable with. So I get that. We are missing those players, but even with them, because after the World Cup, we don't know what's going to happen. We can't just rely upon, and this is what my biggest fear is, you guys. I'm not going to lie, is that we already saw, like, I think it was Simon Collins was saying that Arsenal do want to bring in players, but they will stick with their same philosophy of like, if it's not the perfect player at the perfect price, they won't be held to ransom. But my biggest fear is that we'll see ESR coming back and we'll see Zinchenko coming back and we'll say, and El Neni coming back and say, we don't actually need to bring in more players. We need at least an attacker. I think when El Neni, we might be able to just about get away with it. And the reason why I'm not as high as getting not as high on getting a midfielder as an attacker is because if we're gonna get a midfielder, I don't want it to just be another also ran. I want it to be like a statement, a marquee midfielder. So if we bring in somebody in January that's not quite that, it might cut into it. But in terms of like the attackers, like we need another attacker regardless to if ESR is coming back or not. And I really hope they don't fluff it because they see these players as new signings. It's not good enough. And that's exactly why when people were like, "Oh, the Cronkies are doing such a good job," they are, but we still need to be wary. We still need to look at them and say, "You haven't done the job. We haven't won a title. We haven't won anything yet. We're not a consistent Champions League team, and until we're that, we need to continue to put pressure on them." And so they can't just give us 50 million in January and then they don't spend it because it wasn't the perfect player and the perfect this. We can't I get why they're trying to do that, but, like, I think it's a slippery slope between challenging for a title and fighting for top 4 right now, and we don't wanna slip out of the top 4 race as well, or, like, even be flirting with it. Remember when last season around December, because Chelsea started off kinda like we did. They were kind of in the title race, they were up there, and then around December, they got a couple of injuries. I think one of them was to, like, Reece James, and Chilwell was also injured, and they just slowly started to, like, get closer and closer to the top 4 race where it really did come down to, like, a couple of games before the last game where they secured it. Um, I think it was off the back of one of our losses they secured it, I think, as well. And, we don't even wanna get there because this team in that position, I think, still may bottle it. So it's important not even to get into those positions. Saida says, as much as I love ESR, we can't rely upon him being the like new signing because he's injury prone and we'd leave ourselves short again. I agree. Daniel says the mentality should be to push to win both the Premier League and Europa. Plug those holes. If not, they're not serious. Here's the thing is I'm going to tell you guys right now, I don't give a shit about winning the Europa League. And the reason why is because Arsenal need to get into the top 4. They need to secure it. We need to be going into April feeling like we're in a very comfortable position. Because I don't know if you guys have seen our April, but our April is not fun. Okay. Our April looks a lot like our October, but worse. And so I think I would prefer us to really focus on the league. It's not that I don't want to win the Europa League, but if it came down to it and we needed to prioritize, I would definitely throw the Europa League because we've done so well at the beginning of the season to put ourselves in a very strong position to make sure that we secure top 4, that the last thing that we wanna do is get sidetracked and not make it. Emery tried to play that game, and the more he found out, the more he fucked around, the more he found out that it's hard to keep a team in both of those competitions, and I think we only needed, like in 7 games, we just needed, like, 1 win, and we couldn't get it because we were also in the Europa League, and we were chopping and changing and doing all of this. And if you think this team is frail and a little bit brittle now, just imagine what it'll be like in April when we're going away to City, away to Liverpool, away to Newcastle, away to West Ham, all this type of stuff in the midst of also trying to stay in the Europa League. So for me, I don't give a shit about winning the Europa League. I'd like to see us go far into the FA Cup. I don't give a shit about the Carabao Cup. I think those, like, if we lost to Brighton, I wouldn't care. And not because, like, oh my gosh, like my standards have dropped. It's just this team cannot fight on four fronts. It can barely fight on two. So Europa League is not important to me because I think we have more, based on what we've done so far, we have more of a chance of getting into the top four through the league than trying to get to a final and win it and inevitably have to play somebody that will bottle it too. I just, it's not for me. Um, Aha says winning the Europa League means qualifying for pot one in the Champions League, doesn't it? Um, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe. Um, it's just winning the Europa League is a lot harder than I think we think it is. Because like the times that we were in it with, like the first time we were so bad, we lost in the round of 32. But under Arteta, the next time around, we got to the semifinals and we finished 8th that season. It's just hard. And we're seeing that the team is a little bit thin now. So for me, the Europa League, I think you just want to go as far as you can in it and be respectable. But if it comes down to it, we better throw everything we can at the Premier League and make sure we secure that because we've done so well. We don't want to throw that away. I think that's more what it is that the work that we've done, like here's the thing as well, because there's a conversations around, has Arsenal peaked too fast? Maybe we have. Maybe this is what the way that we were playing in September was the best that we were going to play this season, and maybe we drop a level. And the level that we dropped to is kind of how we were last season, right? Which wasn't bad, by the way. We won 21 games last season. We weren't bad, and we went through some really good form during that season. But even if we dropped to there, what we've done so far could have been the best possible thing before we drop a level. Because last season, had we had started the way that we started this season, and put it together with that second part of last season, we make top 4. I don't wanna throw that away. I don't wanna throw that away. I think even if we peaked early, getting ahead of it is so much better than trying to gain speed after that World Cup, I think. Getting the points now, I think, was really important. Ify says, "Ha ha ha, I like this, Jess. He doesn't give a hitch about Europa League and Carabao. Thank you, I don't." I don't, not right now. I mean, when we get to a point where we can fight on multiple fronts, yeah, I will care more, but I just I need us to be in Champions League next season, and I want us to do it through the league because we've done so much already. Rudo says, "We have never won and it's about pride." I mean, yeah, since we've been in it, obviously we've never won it. We've been to one final and we got to the semifinals. But what I will say is that the Europa League is not a prestigious European competition. And so winning it for me, I think pride comes in more for me when it comes to the FA Cup than it does to the Europa League. The only reason why I'd ever want to win the Europa League is not because the Europa League trophy is a prestigious trophy to have. It's because it is a route into the Champions League. The reason why I rate the FA Cup so highly is because our record in it, and we want to make sure that nobody catches us. And because that means something to Arsenal Football Club more than it just does, the FA Cup. And so I get the pride aspect of it, but if we got into the Champions League and we got back to being a consistent Champions League team, we wouldn't even think about never winning that Europa League. That's just something we think about because we've been in it for so long, but it's not prestigious, it's not anything. Nobody says, "Well, we won the Europa League a couple times." No, nobody says that. Like, it's about winning the league, being a consistent Champions League team, and eventually feeling like you can win the Champions League for Arsenal, in my opinion. Jim White says, "Disagree, Europa is prestige at all. It absolutely freaking stinks. The Carling Cup of European trophies." Martin N says, "But based on your logic, if we get the UCL next season? Are we going to give it up because we can't fight on multiple fronts? Eventually, our team needs to step up and face the challenge. So you have to get your first benchmark in order to start thinking about different things. And I think getting into the Champions League is our number one priority. That's what it is. It's our number one priority. Priorities will shift and change once we get back into the Champions League. So, no, I don't think we should throw the Champions League if we're in it. Um, but that's when we'll be able to get Champions League level players. We'll be able to attract world-class players. We'll be able to have a different level. Arsenal has not been on the level that we should have been on. And so the remit changes based on where you are. I think our remit now is just to get back into the Champions League. Then once we get there, then we can start talking about how do we fight on multiple fronts, and try to win a prestigious competition like the Champions League. Um, do you think that I mean, think about what happened last season. If we had gotten to the Champions League, do you guys think we would have cared about anything else? We wouldn't have, because we know that that is the entry back into where Arsenal needs to be. I get that we need to fight on multiple fronts, but it's not now. And I get what you're saying. Eventually, this team needs to step up and face the challenge, but it's not now. It's once we get back into the Champions League and we can build a squad that can fight on multiple fronts, because we can't do it now. Millen says, "Would you take UEFA Cup and eighth place finish?" Um, you mean would I take the Europa League and an eighth place finish? Um, See, here's the thing. It's because people are always asking, okay, well, if you won the Europa League, but you didn't, that's the only way that you qualified. Would you care? I would care, because why did we finish eighth? We need to be a good league team. And I feel like I would need to know why we finished eighth. I think that would be so important to me. Why did we finish eighth? How many injuries did we have? Things like that. But on the surface, if Arteta, we finished eighth, but we got the Europa League, I'd be happy and I would take it, but I would also want us to look for another manager. And the reason why is because that would mean that Arteta nominally has finished eighth, fifth, and eighth. And that means for me that he's not a good enough manager to help us consistently be a Champions League level team. Because you know what I mean? That's so important. And so for me, I would take it, but then I would think that we need to look at Arteta, because Arsenal have not been a good league team in a very long time. Let's see. Craig AFC says winning trophies is better than getting top four over a long period of time. It is. And see, here's the thing: it's what I'm talking about right now is an isolated moment. It's where we are right this moment. I agree with you. In general, my philosophy or my brain says winning trophies is better than getting top four. So if we got into the Champions League this season by either way, I'd be happy. But what I'm thinking about right now is, what is our best chance right at this moment? Our best chance at the moment is through the league. And so that's what I want to focus on, because we don't know who we're going to get in the Europa League. But what we do know is that a team that has the amount of points that we have accrued in this first third of the season has never finished outside of the top four. And so that's what I want to protect. So I agree with you. I want trophies. Overall, that's what we want. And I'm not saying after this, all I want us to do is finish top four, finish top four, finish top four. But right now, that's all I'm focused on, because Arsenal cannot be in the Europa League next season. It would be ridiculous. Um, let's see. Ivy says, I rather second place and no trophy, to be honest. I want us to build a solid team that has a proper bench as well. You guys let me know. There's 137 of you guys in here. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. What do you care about most? Do you care more about winning trophies, or do you want Arsenal to get back to being a consistent top four team? If you just had to choose one or the other. So an example would be the example that they put up. Would you rather have the Europa League and finish eighth? Would you want to be an Unai Emery type of team? Or do you want to go back to being an Arsenal team? What do you think? Let me know what you guys think, because everybody thinks differently about these things. Koki says 8th place means this team's gone backwards. I kind of agree. Jim White says, absolutely agree. We need that sweet, sweet Champions League bag, all that money. Livy says, I'd want to be a consistent top 4 team. Ivy says, Europa is a waste of time with Barca, Juve, and Atletico in it. I've given up, to be honest. Lone Star says, all I care about is winning the next game. This would you rather is nonsense. Well, some people are responding, Lone Star. So if it's nonsense to you, fair enough. But enough people want to talk about this where I feel like it's worth the conversation. Millen says, how come big teams win treble? Prioritizing one competition over another is a small club mentality. It is, but we're just not there. You're talking about, clubs like Real Madrid. We don't have a Benzema in our team. First of all, we don't have as much European pedigree as we probably should have at this point. And I think European pedigree makes a huge difference. I think some clubs just know how to win. And whether you've been there for a long time or not, it just kind of flows throughout the club. And that's why clubs like Real Madrid, no matter how weak we think they are, they win. And clubs like Man City, like in Champions League, or even PSG in Champions League, struggle because they don't have that European pedigree. You need to build that up over time. And so Arsenal needs to focus on, one, getting back into the Champions League, two, becoming a consistent Champions League team, three, winning the Premier League, and four, then fighting on multiple fronts and stuff like that. It doesn't mean it can't happen fast. It just means that, like, I feel like we need to focus on one thing at a time. And we don't even, like, I'm gonna be honest, like, we just don't have the personalities in our team yet to even be talking about these things. We need to just focus on getting into the top 4. Billy says, at the end of the day, if we finish top 4 and win a trophy, it's a successful season. It is. I think getting into the top 4 is successful for where we are right now. Not for Arsenal of old, but Arsenal right now. Got to get into the top 4. Knock that off of our to-do list and then start focusing on other things. Then the next season, I will expect us to like get out of our group, get to the knockout rounds of the Champions League, maybe win an FA Cup and finish top 4 again. Colin says Arsene Wenger was essentially ran out of our club for top 4 with nothing else. Where are the standards, folks? Because we have to start from where we are right now. So, of course, when we get into the Champions League, if people are still talking about Champions League or qualifying for Champions League is good enough, then we need to assess our standards. But you also need to change the remit based on where you are at the moment. And so right now, if you say, well, we hounded out Arsene Wenger for top 4, so we should sack Arteta if he doesn't win the league this season, I think you're being a little bit disingenuous to like what the reality of the situation is. Next season, when we qualify for the Champions League, if Arsenal fans are saying, well, all we need to do is finish top 4 and that's a successful season, we have not updated the remit based on where we are at the moment, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think we just need to get that first step. That first step, we need to get there. But yeah, I think ultimately, like, we're still in a good position, but it can slip through our fingers as quick. We saw last season how quickly things can slip through your fingers when you're not proactive. And I think Arsenal have been a little bit reactive in some moments, especially during the season. In the summer, we do a really good job trying to build the squad, trying to be very methodical in the way that we do things. But sometimes you have to take a risk in order to get to where you want to be. And I would love to see Arsenal, one, play very strong lineups for the next couple of games, get, as many points as we can from the next 3 Premier League games. I think 7 for me would be feeling like we did a good job. We should be slapping Nottingham Forest at home. We should beat Wolves away, and we should get something from Chelsea away. So I would say 7 points would be good. And then making sure that for me, I would play a strong lineup against Zurich at home. And I know that might sound like, why would you do that? It's because I don't trust the French players in a must-win game to get it over the line. And I think it would be much better if we had the starters that know what they're doing, finish the game off early in the first half, 2-0, boom, and then bring on the fringe players after that. And it might be like, oh, that's too many minutes in their legs, whatever. But what we have seen is they needed just a draw yesterday and they shit the bed. They can't be trusted. And so, first, I would like to see us get at least 7 points of the next Premier League, three Premier League games, beat Zurich, come top of the of that group. I don't care about Brighton. I have to be honest. If we go out of the Carabao Cup, we go out of the Carabao Cup. And then going to the World Cup, hopefully we don't see very many injuries. Hopefully players come back quickly. And then get into the January transfer window and bring in at least one player. I would love to see Zinchenko as well before the World Cup, but I don't think we will. But after that, Zinchenko, ESR, even maybe El Neni will be boost to the squad, but we need more than that. This team it's it just doesn't have enough. And we kind of knew that before the season started. Martin N says, agree we should start our starters and get the win. Jim says, Europa is better than the FA Cup until we win it. Then I never want to see it again ever, whereas I want us to win the FA Cup every single season. Yeah, I mean, going out of the FA Cup so early last season really pained me. It really did. And that's when I realized I was like, yeah, I really want that so much, So I think, yeah, I I want that. I want us to go far. I would love to see us in a final at least. Let's see. Billy says City's second team: Ortega, Akanji, Stones, Ake, Gomez. Oh yeah, Phillips, Palmer, Gundogan, Mahrez, Alvarez, and Grealish. I don't think this is a very strong lineup. I think it is a strong lineup. Why wouldn't it be? Let's see. Colin says Arteta said himself that Arsenal should be winning everything. Just saying. He did say that, but he also didn't say when we should be winning everything. And I'm pretty sure that, like, if you asked Arteta more and say, okay, so you think you should be winning everything? Do you think you should win everything this season? He would say, we're not ready yet. So can't use those quotes, and use them without context. Arteta knows that this team cannot win the league and the Europa League all this season, but he knows eventually we need to get to the point where we're winning everything. Oh yeah, and compared to our bench, Turner, Cedric, Tomiyasu, Holding, KT, El Neni, Sambi, Vieira, Marquinhos, Nketiah, ESR. Adding two players will definitely improve that squad depth. Yeah, it is, because especially in attack and midfield would really help us out quite a bit. And I wouldn't mind seeing, Sambi maybe go on alone if we bring somebody else, because he's not going to get any playing time if we bring in somebody else, right? So I wouldn't mind that. Martin N says, I don't really care about the FA Cup. Winning it doesn't mean anything to me. If we win the Europa League, it shows me that we are making progress. Fair enough. I think for me, if we get into the Champions League via the league, that shows me that we made progress, regardless to if we win the Europa League or not. Because for me, I think the Europa League is such a roll of the dice. But fair enough, that makes sense. Like, it does. Jim says, Savage, please. I love him. It's like, does that guy even exist? Because every time people talk about him, I'm like, does he even exist? So yeah, I think I understand what you guys are coming from. Like, some of you guys want to see us push to be more, want us to push to do more and stuff like that, and want us to win as much as possible and not just like, be okay with just top four. But I think most Arsenal fans feel like we need to get back to that, but it's just a matter of what time scale you're on. So yeah. Let's see. Yo-Yo says Champions League is a necessity for Arteta's development as manager. Let's see. Abdallah says, Jess, who's your favorite player in the current squad? It's tough because I pretty much love them all. So I would say I'm gonna go with Gabriel. I'm gonna go with Gabriel. I love Gabriel. He has a moment every once in a while, but he's so good. Yeah, I'm gonna go Gabriel. Just because like I think we saw yesterday how important he is to the squad, and if you didn't know, now you know. He's our best defender. Saliba is a great, great defender, but he doesn't have the same grit as Gabriel. So right now, Gabriel is probably my favorite player in the squad, but it changes every day. Like, love Ben White, love Jesus, so um Saka, Martinelli. Like, it's hard to choose just because I just love them all. Gabriel Magalhaes. Um, Saksham says Gabriel Magalhaes is so important for our style. Without him, we crumbled. Respect him. I agree. He's so good and so underrated. And I get he has the bozo moment, but he's underrated. Anike says, depending on who the teams are in Europa, I'd be disappointed if we went out embarrassingly. Fair enough. Let's see. Lone Star says, play the kids in the Carabao, but I want us to win. Still, I care. Just context. Yeah, I mean, I would say, because of how the Europa League has kind of unfolded, and now we need to beat Zurich at home. It should be straightforward, but it's not straightforward to me when it's not our starting 11, because the Europa League team, they have a hard time scoring goals, and the last thing you want to do is get into the 60th, 70th minute without having scored a goal. It'll just create an unnecessary nervousness. And if you guys remember Olympiacos round of 32 a couple seasons ago, I just don't want a repeat of that. Like, I don't want the other team to start getting confident because we can't score the goal. And so I'd rather the starting 11 just take the reins and get it done, and then once it's 2-0, then let the fringe players come on, and then the next time that they play will be against Brighton. And whatever happens is whatever happens. I think last time, didn't we go through, even though like Klopp tried to he tried to flop it, like, and it was like a 5-5 shootout or something like that. I would expect it to be like something like that. Even though Brighton might take it serious. I don't care. I don't want it. Billy says projection for next season, assuming Balogun would keep his form. Patino continues to progress. We have more reinforcement. I don't mind if we bring in 128 to 30 player in attack like Trossard or Zaha. I think we need a marquee midfielder in the summer, and then we need another attacker. Trossard and Zaha are good options. I just wonder if like, I think Trossard is destined to probably end up at Chelsea, with Potter, but I get that. And Zaha, we go back and forth with this all the time. I think Zaha is a great player, but I just don't see him at Arsenal. I think that that moment has passed. We should have brought him in instead of Pepe. But yeah, Zaha is a good player. We could look at somebody else, like a different attacker that's not young, that doesn't necessarily is not necessarily in the Premier League. But I get what you guys are saying. I get what you guys are saying. Let's see. Lone Star says Gabriel headed everything out of the box defensively against Southampton. Exactly. Like, he's our defender, and that's why the yin and the yang is so important. Because some people are like, well, why don't we play White and Saliba? I'm like, White and Saliba for me are too similar. So they both want to be on the ball. They need that aggressor next to them that's going to do the actual defensive work. The good thing is that it's like, if I the way that I look at it is like Saliba is 60% on the ball and 40% defender. And Gabriel is 60% defender and 40% on the ball. But when you put it together, all of it goes together quite well. I think if you have both Ben White and Saliba, you have too much on the ball and not enough just like pure defense. And so that's why Gabriel is so important. And his profile is so rare. It's very hard to find somebody who's 6'4", physically imposing, good one-on-one defender, and also good on the ball, and left-footed. It's very rare, and we got him for 25 million. That's why when people want to throw him out every time he makes a mistake, I'm like, but who are you going to bring in that is 100% going to come to Arsenal? It's gonna, because anybody, like, it's a handful of players that are at that level. Handful, and that shows also how good he is, but how much are they gonna cost? So why not just keep Gabriel, and just, if Xhaka can tone down his bozo moments, I think Gabriel can at 24 as well. Billy says, if there's an opportunity for a cheap price, but I don't think Palace would sell, my guess is we'll sign Lindstrom from Frankfurt in January. I think he's a really good player, but the thing about Lindstrom is that, like, I really like him. I'm just not sure if he has the goals as of yet. He's scoring them now, but before that, he wasn't really clinical. So if he were to come to Arsenal, I'd hope that he would have his shooting boots on, because we don't need another player that doesn't really score goals but is a nice player on the ball. Yo-Yo says Gab 6 has been an ever present under Arteta for a reason. I agree. I like players that people don't really realize are doing the hard work, and that's not to say that the players that get the attention, like Ben White and Saliba, don't deserve it. It's just some players, they do the stuff, like, and you just don't notice it. Also, the other thing that we really didn't talk about for the PSV, is that we talked about the first goal, but the second goal was a Ramsdale howler, and he is just somebody that I feel like when we're going through a difficult period, he does things to exacerbate it. If somebody makes a mistake, he turns around and kicks the ball straight into an attacker and it almost goes into our goal. He doesn't have the ability to calm us down. And I do think that they scored the first goal and the second goal came very quickly right after. And Ramsdale panicked, and that's just something that he needs to get out of his whatever, his personality, is that you want your goalkeeper to be a calming presence back there. You want them to be somebody that can sense the temperature of a match. It doesn't exacerbate the scenario because they come out swinging to something that they didn't need to. That was a situation that was completely unavoidable, and his mistake made the game impossible for us to come back from. And I just didn't really understand why he did that, but I just sense that, like if somebody does something, like does a bad back pass or whatever, and he can't do anything with it, then he turns around and the next time that he kicks it into the back of an oncoming attacker. Like, he's doesn't fill me with calm, and that is something that he needs to fix. But like Martin says, Aaron kept us in the Leeds game, though. And again, see, this is the thing about when you have conversations around players. I said specifically in this PSV game, that's what he did. And he does have moments where he does that, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't great against Liverpool, he wasn't great against Leeds, that, he didn't save us in certain circumstances in other games. But he did have a howler yesterday, but that doesn't mean I hate Aaron and I don't see the good things that he does. We know he was good in the Leeds game, but he was diabolical in the game yesterday. Do you know what I mean? So it's fair. It's fair. Like, it's fair to talk about it. True Gunners TV says, question, Jess, if we're still top of the league come January, should we invest in the squad heavily to try to compete for the title, or should we just invest enough to secure top four? I mean, I think it depends on what's available. I think it just depends on what's available. So, like, the difference between, is it the caliber of players you mean, or the number of players? Because I think regardless to if we're in a top four race or in a title race, we need two players in January. I just feel like it's a slippery slope. There's not going to be much between the teams. I don't think anybody's going to run away with it. And I know that might seem silly because it's like, well, what about Man City? Man City are dropping points, and I think there's teams that could take points off of them. So they may be a little bit further ahead. Let's say that they're 6 points ahead, but everything beyond that is going to be really, really close. And so I don't think there's much in it in terms of, if we're in the title race, we should be doing this, or top four, we should be doing this. I think regardless of where we're at, because it's going to be close, we need to invest. And that's going to be like a midfielder and an attacker. If they're serious, if they turn around and say, there's not the perfect player and perfect time, we're going to be in so much trouble come after the World Cup, because we have too many players that are important that get injured. Zinchenko, Ramsdale. I mean, we can't do anything about him, but he also is somebody that gets injured. There's nothing we can do about it, but he's also somebody that I look at as like, for a goalkeeper, you always got something going on. Partey, those are like the main ones, and then God forbid if Jesus gets injured. So yeah, we definitely need to invest. And I don't think, for me, it doesn't matter where we're at, we need two players. And it's all about the market as well. Like, you can find players if you want to get them in. I think if you act like there's nobody out there, then there won't be, but it's kind of like how Arsenal acted like there wasn't anybody for us to bring in January, but Spurs turned around and bought in Bentancur and Kulusevski. Kulusevski is the exact player we're looking for right now, by the way, to play for Saka or play on the other side or can play through the middle that has goals. Kulusevski is the exact player that we're looking for now, and they acted like they didn't see that player, and he was offered to us before he was offered to Spurs. So you definitely can um, find players if you're actually really looking. Mamang says Ferran Torres and Danilo, in my opinion. Um, you guys, I like Ferran Torres. I think he's at the wrong place, and he would be good at Arsenal. But then also, it's kind of like, would he wanna come back, to England? He was kinda, like, running away, trying to go back home. I think some of those players might be, like, so desperate to be at Barcelona that even if they're not playing, they'll stay. So, with Ferran Torres, I think, even though I think he'd be decent for us and he can play across our front three and understands the way that we play, he's played with Arteta before, and Jesus, I think he will want to stay at Barcelona. And Danilo, it's just a matter of, like, if he can get up to speed and be useful to us this season. If he's a project, he's not gonna be able to help us, but those are 2 good options. Um, let's see, Saksham says, "Jess, would you get Dzeko? He is the best one of best performing target man and would be cheap and effective coming off the bench." Um, I don't like those types of moves, in terms of, like, I get that he could be useful, but I just wonder about, is he so good that if he came back to the Premier League, he would still be useful? So I know that he was in the Premier League before with Man City, I get that, but has he been in Italy so long that, like, if he came back to the Premier League, it'd be like what Wolves have done with Diego Costa? You know what I mean? So I get that. Maybe there's other options we could look at, instead of him. But I get that he has the experience, and I know a lot of Arsenal fans wanna see more of these moves. I know some Arsenal fans are like, "Why can't we bring in some older players that have been around for a little bit longer?" It's not for me, personally, but if maybe you think that he has more value than I do, and that's fair enough. Lone Star says, "I want Mudryk." A lot of people do. He'd be really, really expensive. Saksham says, "Mudryk is East European Pepe." I get those kind of vibes too. Not that he's like maybe as bad as Pepe was, but in terms of he is kind of like having a really good season. He's kind of like the hot topic, and I haven't seen him play besides on the counterattack. Now, the opposite take to that is that that's just how it is in the Champions League, and, he plays for Shakhtar Donetsk, they're the best team in their league, and so they have to play against low blocks in their league, and I just haven't seen it before. That's a fair enough point, um, as well, but, I mean, they want a lot of money for him, and I don't see us doing that in January. I don't see us doing 50 plus. So, yeah. Gakpo, he's only really good in the Eredivisie, right? He's only really good when he's in the Netherlands. I think that's kind of the point that I've gotten from him when they played against us at home. They weren't good. He was more involved um, at their place when he played against Leicester in the Conference League last season. He did nothing. He really is somebody that I'm like, he needs a move before the big move. That's my thought on him. He needs a move before the big move. So yeah, you guys, I wanted to go a little bit longer because of course the internet almost made me cry earlier, but I'm glad you guys stuck with me. There's 120 of you guys in here, so make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Um, we'll see what happens against Nottingham Forest. I'm sure we'll see our best starting 11, and we'll see if we can turn our performances around. But I'm expecting a win. My score prediction for the Nottingham Forest game is 2-0. Um, I don't think they're that good. I know that they beat Liverpool, but they beat Liverpool at their place the Emirates has been very good for us this season, so I'd expect it to continue on. We played a lot of away games, and it'd be nice to get in front of our own fans. This has to be a banker. It has to be 3 points, and put it away in the first half and don't give them any hope. So yeah, I think 2-0 is a scoreline that I'm going for that game, and I will talk to you guys after that. I'm actually going to the game, so yeah, I will be on, like, Instagram and stuff and show you guys how it is and blah, blah, blah. Like, I've been to Arsenal games before, but, I've always sat, like, in the club seats, and so, now I'm gonna be, like, just in the stands, which is gonna be so much better because the club seats are terrible. Um, no offense, but, like, it's just boring up there, and when you have, like, an American accent like me, everybody looks at you like you're a freak. So, it's gonna be fun to be, like, just with everybody else, and I'm just hoping to, like, see a really good that's why I chose Nottingham Forest at home because I wanted to make sure that I saw a win. Um, and we'll see how it goes. But thank you guys so much for sticking by me. I really appreciate it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye y'all.